As we wrap up Unit 1, I wanted to cover the athlete insiders in each chapter, Chapter 1 and 2. First, I'm hoping that the theoretical underpinning articles helped you frame and shape the knowledge and information from Chapters 1 and 2 into a model, piecing those things together to make sense of holistic patient care, what that looks like for you, what that looks like for these individual athletes covered in the case studies, which are termed Athlete Insider in the chapter. So from Chapter 1, we have Seth, who's an injured football player, a first year, away from home, Division I university, so high pressure system there. All of these elements you're sort of inferring from the case as it's presented. So he injures his knee and quite severely with an ACL injury. And the comments are that he is nervous, scared, replaying the injury, as well as afraid of letting his significant others down, that including his family, his dad, other individuals that are important to that athlete. So when we think about these things and how to care for this athlete in a holistic manner, being that he's away from home, establishing that social support network, including the coach in the rehabilitation process and the education process about the injury. Oftentimes we don't think, we assume that coaches know what an ACL injury is and what it entails just because it's been in the popular press. Don't assume this. And some of our injuries might be a little bit different or more complex. So including that coaching staff, the athlete's support group as far as the team side, in that athlete patient education is important. The evidence-based practice that was articles that were covered in Unit 1 or in Chapter 1 are important in this case study, in this Athlete Insider, as the Clement et al. Article covered athlete expectations. Now, this is a young male athlete, and the expectations that athlete has, maybe he hasn't been injured severely before and hasn't had a lot of contact with an athletic trainer or care provider. The athlete then expects, in this case, that therapeutic and rehab environment's not going to provide a whole heck of a lot for them. With this expectation, they may not expect education. They may not expect that we know completely what we're doing, and they may do some things on their own as a result, and it might be detrimental to their healing process. With that in mind, patient education becomes crucial for the male first-time injured athlete who doesn't have a lot of experience working with athletic trainers or healing injuries, for that matter. So patient education is important for Seth. He also seems to be replaying the injury, and obviously anxiety plays in there too. So some relaxation techniques would be good for Seth, as well as systematic desensitization as he moves back to the playing field. Baby steps, building his confidence along the way is going to help with that replaying of the injury as he gets into phase 3 or return to sport. Thinking also about that replaying of injury and the anxiety associated, educating that patient, educating Seth in this case on the injury, hopefully will lead to a lessened anxiety or a lessened state of stress surrounding the injury and the cognitive appraisal of that injury. So we can help there as care providers. The social support network I already mentioned, important and crucial, and communication becomes paramount with the family, with his dad, as well as with the coaching staff to really keep Seth intertwined in his sport network, his team network, as he's away from home, away from his family network. Involving the coach, again, very important. So those factors hopefully help wrap the Athlete Insider from Chapter 1 together, looking at that cognitive appraisal model, utilizing the evidence-based practice research that was presented in Chapter 1 to inform your practice surrounding supporting Seth. Again, knowing differences between male and female athletes as presented by Clement, and looking at some of the other pieces that were presented and how they help shape what you would do for that athlete in that case. Chapter 2 then had Petra, the cross-country skier, and a very competitive case there as well, in that she's competing for the Olympics and winning a medal for her country. In those cases, stakes are high, and we may not think that socio-cultural aspects or socio-cultural influences on our athletes are that high. However, the cognitive appraisal of that athlete is what's important. How they feel, how those factors are influencing them in their decisions to compete. Like Petra in this case in chapter 2, I myself have a close friend who competes in the Ironman races, and she was attempting to finish a race. It was her third in 3 years, and she ruptured an intestine, and she couldn't run. It was to the point where but that was what stopped her. She was pushing and pushing and pushing through this abdominal pain. The physician said likely it was a gas bubble in the intestine at that point when she tweaked or moved and it ruptured the intestine. And then the contents of her intestine began to leak out into the mediastinum, or into the intestinal area, rather. So in thinking about that, athletes push themselves and push themselves. And it's a culture of risk. Looking at Fink's work in chapter 2, as well as looking at Frey's culture of risk. So look that one up as well. I believe that's 91. Looking at those two models it will help you shape when an athlete is doing too much in rehabilitation, or maybe they're risking when they shouldn't. The textbook also presents research on, I think that's the Fink article, on coaches being part of making a decision on that athlete's readiness to return to play. And as a care provider, thinking about that coach, as a physical therapist, thinking about that coach making a decision, I'm like, no way. As an athletic trainer, we understand that intimacy of the sideline and how that individual can play a role in that return to play, and that stress of that coach in your ear making that decision on the sideline. So factoring all those things in, there is a culture of risk in sport. And making sure that we're aware of that, we're mindful of that when dealing with the athlete, and understanding that those are social pressures in the biopsychosocial model, in the cognitive appraisal model. They exist. And how in self-determination theory, how they might play a role. So be mindful of all those things as we wrap up Unit 1 and carry it into Unit 2.